What's up, guys? Today I wanted to talk about Genesys format in the Yu-Gi-Oh trading card game, and I've been pacing around my house and sitting here in front of the camera and reading articles that were posted by Konami about Genesys and reflecting on locals, which was yesterday. We run Genesys locals once a month, so I've played 2 now, and the first one I played Exo Sister and the second one I played Rose Dragon. I feel like people want a video where I'm like, Genesys good or Genesys bad, and it's like, I don't know what I think about it yet. Maybe I do a pros and cons video, like things I like and things I don't like. Maybe I do a video, I don't know, of my suggestions for what could improve. I worry that Genesys might be fundamentally flawed. Now that I've said the thing and I have your attention, consider liking and subscribing to help my channel grow. Thanks so much. Now, when I say fundamentally flawed, I don't mean unsalvageable. Yu-Gi-Oh as an eternal format card game is in a unique space balance-wise where we have to power creep the game to continue to sell product and to continue to ask players to innovate. I say we, I'm speaking for Konami, right? Without making stuff feel obsolete too fast. People would argue about whether or not they've done this successfully, I think. But for the most part, with like legacy support existing and with the introduction of themes that create potential synergies with things that are like older, like how I can play Fiendsmith in my Valmonica deck, I think that kind of thing helps it feel less like they're just enforcing rotation with power creep. But that doesn't mean that that sensation isn't there, and you see that at like the top tier competitive level the most, right? Because like that's where players are making the least concessions in terms of building to preference, and they're building to power, because there's potential prizing available and there's potential bragging rights available. And there's also just people who have a competitive inclination and want to play the game at the highest level and test the limits of the card pool and test the limits of player output. And all of those reasons are valid to want to play meta and to play the strongest deck. And that's why we see like changing formats in Yu-Gi-Oh! And that's why cards that are printed recently are generally, and I say this like loosely because there are times when new cards come out and they're not strong, but typically when a format changes, it's because something new and powerful has come out and redefined the limit of what a deck can do. And so enter Genesys format, a magical, mystical land where every deck is equal and anything can compete as long as it doesn't include a Link monster or a Pendulum monster. And that's like my first problem, but I'll just wait on that. Genesys, in the words of Konami, is a fully supported tournament system we've been working on for over 2 years that you can now play at your local official tournament store. Genesys was designed for everyone, but it's mostly meant as a big tent to provide good and fun home for all sorts of duelists. Duelists looking for a less complicated game, duelists who are new to the game, duelists who have always had a favorite deck and want their favorite deck to be a little more competitive, anybody looking for a new experience or change of pace, duelists who love a deck building challenge, and everyone who just can't get enough of dueling. And so in Genesys, every single card, instead of having a forbidden or limited status, has a point value associated with it. And the standard constructed format for Genesys is 100 points. Every card is assigned a point value based on how like strong it is, and then you use your points to build your deck. And this is great on paper because theoretically, like, we understand that there is a power difference across cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! And there needs to be some kind of through line for how we create a format where either the developers or the players agree on what the power threshold is. And I talked about this in my last video, but that's kind of just the idea that like player preference and card availability equalize into a metagame that is like, these are the end boards that are the strongest permitted by the game, and these are the end boards that we're willing to play into, and this is the interaction that exists, and that's how you determine like what's good and what's not. I talked about it a lot in my last video, please go watch it. But in Genesys, we don't know why cards have the points that they have. We don't know why a searcher like Alpha Thuban, Drytron Alpha Thuban, costs 33 points, and a searcher like Dracotail Lucius costs 0. And I'm not even saying like I like Dracotail, I play it in advanced. It's a good deck for Genesis. Even my advanced list, I play 15 fusion monsters. I don't play a single link. There's no pendulums in the deck. It's perfect for Genesis. Perfect for Genesis. But the points just don't make sense. What I need to talk about is this duality of points between engine cards and points between non-engine cards, where like you're incentivized as a Yu-Gi-Oh player knowing that you're going to lose 50% of coin flips and about 85% of decks want to go first. You want non-engine, you want interaction pieces in your deck. So you choose your deck based on what you want to play, theoretically, or what you think is strong. You build to preference or you build to power, like I just freaking said. And then you're like, okay, if I'm building to preference or I'm building to power and this is the archetype I've selected, this is how many points are required for the list that I've decided I want to play. Or at least this is how I build a deck, right? Like I think about the engine, I'm like, what can I get away with? What costs points? Is there anything I can cut from this pile of cards that cost points? I do the math, how many do I have left? And then I like optimize based on the number of deck slots that I have available and the number of points that I have available. I optimize my non-engine around that number. And I do not like that process. I wish, and hear me out, this is gonna sound a little crazy, I wish that Konami had 2 different point lists. One for engines and one for non-engine / staple cards, where we can value the difference between an Ash Blossom and an Effect Veiler, because we understand there's a concrete difference between the power level of those cards. And we can power scale the difference between a Stratos and a Lucius. That way, you don't have this mess of like, now I want to choose an engine that costs 0 points so I can spend 100 points on hand traps. Like, good Yu-Gi-Oh decks should have hand traps in them. I shouldn't have to sit here and forego Ash Blossom in a 2025 Yu-Gi-Oh world because we're playing in a 2025 Yu-Gi-Oh world. If you haven't played against Genesis Radiant Typhoon, it is good. We're playing 2025 Yu-Gi-Oh! Archmage and Genesis is a strong deck. And so I shouldn't have to sit here and be like, well, I can't play Ash if I want to play this deck. I should say I have to play a weaker version of this deck and Ash costs more non-engine points. But I'm still making the choice because it's a part of Yu-Gi-Oh! It's a part of Yu-Gi-Oh! And there's 0 point hand traps. There's DD Crow, there's Skullmeister, I get it. But there's no Walmart Ash Blossom. And then you might say, but that's the point. You're not supposed to just play the same hand traps in every single deck. If you have an engine list and a non-engine list, people are just gonna optimize the non-engine list and they're gonna choose the math that makes the most sense for hand traps. And to that, I say, yay, good! Because even in advanced, people play different hand trap lineups and there's no such thing as points in those, and most of our hand traps are not restricted. And I think that's a good thing. Like, Purge decks don't play the same hand traps as Impulse decks. And if they printed Walmart Ash, maybe people wouldn't just default to Ash, but Ash negates Charmies and every deck searches. So why are we mad that like people want to play one of the best cards in Yu-Gi-Oh? There needs to be a best card. There needs to be a best card. There's no such thing as a game where the best card in the game doesn't exist. There's no such thing as a game where everything is equally good. And so in Genesis, when you pick apart and you try to quantify like, oh, this is this many points because of this, and this is this many points because of this, you ignore the whole foundation of Yu-Gi-Oh! And this is again, like maybe a problem with like Rivalry of Warlords format, for those of you who are familiar with that, where you choose like archetypes that are allowed in Rivalry. But Yu-Gi-Oh! Is about choice. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is about, like, there's a reason that people show up to tournaments with different decks. And it's because Yu-Gi-Oh! Is about choice. Choice of engine, choice of non-engine. And Genesis points are supposed to make the game more flexible, but in reality, it just feels like more restrictive to me. Because it's like, okay, now, like the adventure token engine costs 50 points! I have gone completely off the rails with where I wanted to go with this. It just goes to show, like, I don't know how I feel about the format. I really don't. I feel like if they worked and worked and worked and worked on point values and got it down to a science where it was deliberate about this many points are assigned to this card because it results in endboard X, or this card is a piece in endboard X and therefore is worth X points. It's hard when Yu-Gi-Oh is so generic and you want to value the function of a card in deck A, but it does something completely different in deck B, and it's valid in both, and you want players to play both because Genesys is supposed to be the format of choice. Your favorite deck has a bit more of a competitive edge, but you just feel like, okay, well, I'm at the mercy of whether or not they think I'm using Omega to hand loop 5 or if I'm using it in pure Psy-Frame, and I don't get to choose. So let me know in the comments what you've been playing in Genesys. Every week that I go, I try to play a deck that has an engine that costs as few points as possible, and that's been my philosophy as I've gone to locals, and probably will continue to be my philosophy as I continue to go to locals, because I'm too non-engine pilled to do anything else. Maybe that is, now maybe I'm coming full circle right at the end. Maybe that's the thing, is like, there's all different kinds of players and everybody values something else, and if you don't value non-engine, you can play your favorite banned degenerate endboard piece. Cool. I think there needs to be a little bit more critical thought applied to why cards have points and how many points each card has. I'm not completely writing it off. I will still continue to play. I love Yu-Gi-Oh! I want the format to be good. I didn't even get to Link Monsters and Pendulums, which I want in Genesys. I guarantee you it's possible and doable. And this won't be the last video I make on the topic. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow.